The airport was busy, filled with travelers hurrying through the terminals, some pulling suitcases on wheels, others checking their phones, and a few families navigating through the crowd. Among them, a young black girl moved quietly but confidently, carrying her small backpack and a rolling suitcase. She kept her head up and tried to stay focused, making sure she didn't miss her flight. She had traveled before and knew the usual routine. But something about the security checkpoint today felt different. As she approached the line for security, she noticed a police officer standing near the conveyor belt, his eyes scanning the crowd. At first, she didn't pay much attention, assuming he was just doing his job. But as she stepped closer, the officer's gaze fixed on her in a way that made her pause. There was no reason for it, no sign that she had done anything wrong, but his stare was sharp and unsettling. She took a deep breath and continued walking, trying not to let herself feel nervous. When she reached the security area, the officer stepped forward and blocked her path. His tone was harsh as he demanded that she stop. She looked at him politely and asked if she could help clarify anything. Her voice was calm and she kept her hands visible, showing that she had nothing to hide. The officer, however, didn't respond to her words. Instead, he accused her of being suspicious for no reason other than her appearance. His words were sharp and demeaning, and the surrounding travelers began to notice the interaction. The girl felt a surge of anxiety, but reminded herself to stay calm. She had been taught that losing her temper or raising her voice could make the situation worse. Instead, she stood tall, her shoulders back, and spoke respectfully but firmly, explaining that she had done nothing wrong and that she was simply trying to catch her flight. Her calmness contrasted with the officer's aggressive stance, drawing the attention of a few bystanders who began to watch quietly from a distance. The officer continued to escalate, his voice rising as he made more accusations. He demanded to see her identification and questioned her about her presence at the airport. She complied politely, handing over her ID without a word of complaint. She answered his questions clearly and truthfully, explaining her travel plans and why she was there. Despite her respectful answers, the officer's tone remained hostile, and he seemed intent on asserting his authority rather than seeking the truth. Travelers passing by began to notice the tension in the air. Some slowed down to observe, sensing that something unusual was happening. A few whispered to each other, sharing looks of concern and curiosity. The girl noticed the growing attention but stayed focused, maintaining her composure. She understood that the situation was delicate, and she refused to let fear or frustration dictate her behavior. The officer's hostility grew, and he leaned closer, invading her personal space. He continued to speak in a sharp, accusatory tone, implying that she was being dishonest and that she might be hiding something. She stayed calm, keeping her voice steady as she repeated the facts about her travel plans. Her clarity and honesty seemed to confuse him, as if he wasn't used to being met with composed resistance from someone so young. Minutes passed, and the tension became almost unbearable. The girl felt her heart racing, but she kept her breathing steady, reminding herself to remain calm. She noticed the expressions of the bystanders. Some were shocked, others concerned, and a few clearly disapproving of the officer's behavior. Their silent observation gave her a sense of quiet support, even if they weren't directly intervening. She continued to answer questions politely, her voice unwavering. Suddenly, the officer's frustration boiled over. In a moment that shocked everyone nearby, he slapped her across the face. The sound echoed slightly in the terminal, drawing gasps from travelers who had been watching. The girl staggered slightly from the impact, her hand instinctively going to her cheek. For a brief moment, she felt a mix of pain, disbelief, and fear. People around her whispered and shifted uneasily, unsure how to react to what had just happened. Despite the shock and the sting of the slap, the girl took a deep breath and reminded herself to stay composed. She knew that reacting with anger or fear could escalate the situation further. Her training, her upbringing, and her understanding of herself reminded her that staying calm and clear-headed was her best course of action. She held her posture steady, lifted her head, and prepared to respond in a way that would assert her dignity and truth. The officer stepped back slightly, surprised by her lack of a dramatic reaction. He had expected fear or tears, perhaps an angry outburst, but she remained composed, her eyes steady and her expression calm. The bystanders around them leaned in slightly, their whispers growing louder as they sensed that the encounter was far from ordinary. The girl's calmness under such direct aggression made it clear that she was not intimidated, and it shifted the energy in the terminal. She spoke a single word, carefully chosen in a tone that was calm but authoritative. It was a word that carried weight, a word that immediately made the officer pause. He blinked, taken aback, and for the first time he seemed unsure of himself. The bystanders noticed the sudden change. The way the officer's body language shifted from aggressive to hesitant. Murmurs of approval and surprise rippled through the crowd, as people recognized the power in her composure and clarity. Even as the officer tried to regain control, the girl remained steady. She repeated her statement calmly, reinforcing her truth and making it clear that she would not be intimidated or silenced. Her voice was polite but firm. After the slap, the young girl took a slow, steady breath, feeling the sting on her cheek, but refusing to let it dominate her. She lifted her head, her eyes meeting the officer's directly. She could feel the tension in the air. Travelers around them were watching in silence, some with shock, others with curiosity. She knew that her next words had to carry weight and clarity to prevent further aggression and to assert her dignity. With a calm but firm voice, she said a single word, carefully chosen to halt the officer's actions. It was her name or a title that immediately communicated authority and respect. The simplicity of the word carried a confidence that the officer had not anticipated. He blinked, momentarily frozen, his aggression faltering as he processed her unexpected composure. Bystanders noticed the pause, sensing that the power dynamic had shifted. The girl's calm authority began to draw attention, and a quiet murmur spread among those watching. She maintained eye contact, keeping her posture upright, shoulders squared, and hands visible. Her composure was deliberate, sending a clear message that she would not be intimidated. The officer seemed confused, unsure whether to escalate further or to step back. His previous confidence, built on assumptions and aggression, was now challenged by her quiet strength. She calmly repeated her word, reinforcing the assertion that she was not to be dismissed or treated unfairly. The bystanders began to murmur in recognition and support. A few people discreetly recorded the interaction on their phones, understanding that what they were witnessing was extraordinary. The girl noticed the growing attention but did not let it distract her. She continued to stand firmly, her voice steady and her words clear, reiterating her truth and the facts about why she was at the airport. Her calm clarity contrasted sharply with the officer's tense and wavering behavior. Travelers who had been passing by slowed down, curious about the confrontation. Some whispered to each other, expressing disbelief that someone so young could command such authority without raising their voice. The girl understood that the strength of her calmness was influencing those around her. She had been taught that remaining composed under pressure could be more powerful than shouting or arguing, and now she was proving it in a high-stakes situation. The officer attempted to speak, trying to regain control of the situation. His voice wavered slightly as he made demands, questioning her about her travel documents and intentions. The girl responded clearly, politely, and firmly, providing the information he asked for without hesitation or defiance. Each answer she gave was deliberate, measured, and factual, making it impossible for the officer to accuse her of dishonesty or disrespect. Her calmness and clarity began to shift the energy around them, leaving the officer increasingly uncomfortable. As the interaction continued, a few witnesses moved closer, drawn by the girl's courage and the absurdity of the officer's aggression. Some discreetly recorded the scene, others whispered their approval or concern. The girl noticed these reactions but remained focused on the officer, understanding that maintaining her composure was key to managing the situation effectively. She spoke confidently, explaining her travel plans succinctly and respectfully, ensuring that there was no misunderstanding about her actions or intentions. Minutes felt like hours as the tension persisted. The officer's attempts to assert dominance became less convincing, and his gestures grew uncertain. He leaned in, trying to intimidate her, but her steady gaze and calm demeanor prevented him from regaining the upper hand. The bystanders' attention was fixed on the girl, many of them recognizing the bravery and poise she displayed despite the aggression she had endured. Her calmness had transformed the situation, showing that dignity and clarity could counteract hostility. She repeated her assertions when the officer tried to challenge her, keeping her tone polite but firm. Each word reinforced her right to be treated with respect and her unwillingness to be intimidated. The officer's initial anger gave way to uncertainty, and the surrounding travelers could sense the shift. The power dynamic had changed. The girl's composure and authority now dominated the interaction. She had turned what could have been a humiliating and frightening encounter into a demonstration of courage and dignity. The murmurs of approval from the crowd grew louder. Some travelers expressed disbelief that such a young person could remain so composed under direct aggression. Others whispered about the officer's actions, questioning whether he had overstepped his authority. The girl stood quietly but confidently, her body language and tone communicating that she would not allow disrespect to continue. Her one-word statement had set the stage, but her continue. The girl stood upright, her breathing steady, her hands visible and her gaze fixed on the officer. The initial shock of the slap had faded, replaced by a quiet resolve. She knew that reacting with anger or panic would only escalate the situation, and she refused to give the officer the satisfaction of seeing her lose control. Instead, she focused on the facts, on her own dignity, and on maintaining her calm authority. She repeated her one-word response, this time adding a few carefully chosen words to clarify her identity and rights. She spoke in a calm, clear tone, making sure every word was precise and respectful. The officer's expression shifted from aggression to confusion. He blinked, and for a moment it was as if he couldn't believe that someone so young could maintain such composure and authority. The bystanders noticed the change, their whispers growing as they recognized the girl's courage and the shift in the dynamic. People around them began to take a more active interest. Some discreetly pulled out their phones to record the encounter, while others whispered to each other about the inappropriate behavior of the officer. The girl noticed this silent support but did not let it distract her. She understood that her calm, factual responses were what truly mattered. Each time the officer attempted to interrupt or assert dominance, she responded with clarity and composure, leaving him increasingly uncertain. The officer leaned in, his tone rising as he attempted to regain control. He questioned her further, trying to intimidate her with aggressive gestures and sharp words. She responded politely, providing the information he requested and explaining her presence at the airport. She spoke with such clarity that it left no room for misinterpretation. Her calmness made it clear that she was not afraid, and this unsettled the officer even more. Around them, the crowd grew slightly, drawn by the tension in the terminal and the girl's composed demeanor. Travelers whispered to one another, some expressing disbelief at the young girl's courage and others quietly noting the officer's inappropriate behavior. A few adults glanced at each other, impressed by the girl's poise and the way she handled herself under pressure. She noticed the attention but remained focused, understanding that her main objective was to maintain her composure and assert her truth. The officer tried to raise his voice again, but it sounded strained and unconvincing. He gestured toward her belongings, implying that there might be something suspicious, but the girl responded clearly and truthfully, detailing the contents of her bag and her travel plans. She spoke without hesitation or defensiveness, demonstrating that her words were reliable and factual. Her calm authority began to dominate the interaction, making it difficult for the officer to continue his aggressive behavior without looking unreasonable. Minutes passed, and the tension in the terminal grew. Bystanders continued to watch, some nodding subtly in support, others quietly recording. The girl remained composed, answering each question calmly, her voice steady and clear. Each response reinforced her credibility and authority, while the officer's aggressive posture seemed increasingly fragile. The contrast between her calm dignity and his aggression became more pronounced, drawing the attention of more travelers in the area. She calmly stated her rights, explaining that she was being treated unfairly and that her identity and purpose at the airport were clear. Her tone was respectful but firm, leaving no room for dismissal. The officer hesitated, unsure how to respond. His earlier confidence had been shaken by her calm and factual assertions. The bystanders began to sense that the girl had taken control of the situation simply through her composure and clarity. A few travelers approached discreetly, asking if she was okay and quietly offering support. She nodded politely, acknowledging their concern but remaining focused on the officer. She understood that any shift in attention could affect the interaction, and she kept her focus sharp. Her posture, calm voice, and clear statements reinforced the authority she had established with her one-word response, making it increasingly difficult for the officer to justify his behavior. The officer tried to demand more information, raising his voice slightly, but the girl maintained a steady tone. She provided concise and truthful answers, reiterating her presence at the airport and her legitimate travel plans. Her calmness, intelligence, and clarity gradually diffused the tension. Each measured response undermined the officer's authority, making his aggressive behavior appear unreasonable and unprofessional to the bystanders watching. Around them, whispers of support grew louder. Some travelers expressed surprise at her courage and poise, while others shook their heads in disapproval at the officer's actions. The girl noticed this collective recognition, but remained focused on maintaining her dignity and clarity. She understood that the power of calm authority was more effective than confrontation, and she continued to demonstrate it in every word and gesture. The officer's attempts to assert dominance faltered further. His voice wavered and his gestures became hesitant. The girl continued to answer questions clearly, politely, and assertively. She spoke about her identity and her travel plans in a way that left no room for doubt or misinterpretation. The bystanders sensed the shift, their whispers of support growing louder as they realized the girl's composure had transformed the situation. She reminded the officer, calmly but firmly, that his aggressive behavior was unnecessary and that she had done nothing wrong. Her words were precise, respectful, and confident, and they resonated in the terminal. The officer seemed momentarily at a loss for how to respond. The young girl's calm demeanor and measured words had established a presence that could not be dismissed, and the crowd of bystanders recognized the power in her approach. The atmosphere in the terminal had changed. Travelers who had been merely observing began to acknowledge the girl's bravery and composure. A few discreetly took videos, while others whispered quietly to their companions about how impressive it was to see someone so young maintain such dignity under direct aggression. The girl remained composed, understanding that her continued calmness was key to asserting her authority and maintaining control of the tension in the airport terminal continued to build as the girl stood firm, her breathing steady, her posture confident, and her voice calm yet assertive. The officer, still trying to regain control, glanced around nervously as more bystanders observed the scene. People had started to notice the situation more clearly now, and whispers of concern and surprise were spreading throughout the nearby travelers. The girl realized that her calm demeanor was not only holding the officer in check, but also shaping how the crowd viewed the interaction. She repeated her clear, measured statements about her identity and her travel plans, emphasizing that she had done nothing to warrant the aggression she experienced. Her composure was deliberate. Each word was precise and respectful, and it carried an authority that the officer could not dismiss. His attempts to interrupt or challenge her were becoming less forceful, and he seemed unsure how to proceed. The girl had effectively created a situation where any further aggression on his part would only make him appear unreasonable and unprofessional. Few travelers began recording the interaction on their phones more openly, while others whispered quietly, expressing admiration for the girl's courage. She noticed the support, but remained focused on maintaining her own poise. She understood that her calm and clear communication was the key factor in influencing both the officer and the bystanders. Her ability to remain composed under direct aggression was gradually shifting the balance of authority in her favor. The officer tried again to assert dominance, raising his voice slightly and gesturing toward her belongings. He questioned her once more, implying that there might be something suspicious. The girl responded politely and clearly, explaining the contents of her bag and her travel plans. She did not let the officer's aggressive tone affect her, maintaining a calm and steady voice. Her clarity made it impossible for him to accuse her of lying or hiding anything. Each word she spoke reinforced her credibility and further unsettled the officer. The crowd of bystanders had grown, with some travelers stopping to observe more closely. A few adults whispered to each other, expressing disbelief at the girl's poise and courage. The girl remained focused, understanding that her calm composure was her greatest strength. She continued to speak respectfully, explaining that her presence at the airport was legitimate and that the officer's actions were unjustified. Her tone, it was firm but polite, leaving no room for ambiguity. As the interaction continued, the officer's gestures became less confident. He shifted his weight, fidgeted with his uniform, and muttered half-formed statements. The girl's steady posture, clear statements, and composed demeanor contrasted sharply with his uncertainty. Travelers nearby noticed the difference, whispering about the stark contrast between the young girl's authority and the officer's faltering aggression. Her calmness had created a situation where the officer's actions were being judged not only by her, but also by the observing crowd. The girl calmly emphasized her rights and the unfairness of the situation. She explained that she had complied with all requests and that there was no reason for the officer's aggressive behavior. Her voice was steady, respectful, and confident. The officer's attempts to regain control were increasingly ineffective. Each time he spoke, his words lacked conviction, while her calm authority remained unwavering. The bystanders recognized this, their whispers and glances reinforcing the shift in power dynamics. Some travelers discreetly moved closer to show support, while others simply observed in quiet admiration. A few recorded videos of the interaction, understanding that what they were witnessing was remarkable. The girl continued to respond to the officer's questions and challenges with clarity and composure. Her calm voice and precise words left no room for misinterpretation and no justification for further aggression. She had effectively established her authority through dignity and intelligence rather than confrontation. Minutes passed as the tension stretched in the terminal. The officer's attempts to assert dominance were faltering, his voice wavering and gestures hesitant. The girl maintained her calm composure, answering questions and asserting her truth without raising her voice. Each statement she made reinforced her credibility and highlighted the officer's inappropriate behavior. The bystanders' attention remained fixed on the encounter, with some whispering encouragement and others shaking their heads in disbelief at the officer's actions. The girl calmly restated her travel plans, emphasizing that she had followed all necessary procedures and had no intention of causing trouble. She spoke with authority, clarity, and dignity, demonstrating that her behavior was entirely appropriate. The officer seemed increasingly trapped. Any further aggression would be witnessed and potentially recorded, and the girl's composed responses made it impossible for him to escalate without cons. The young girl stood in the middle of the airport terminal, her breathing steady, her posture firm, and her eyes calm yet focused. The officer, now visibly unsettled, struggled to maintain his authority as travelers continued to watch the unfolding scene. The girl's composed demeanor, clear statements, and polite but firm tone had completely shifted the power dynamic. The crowd had grown larger, some discreetly recording the incident on their phones, while others whispered among themselves, expressing disbelief at her courage and the officer's inappropriate behavior. She calmly reiterated her travel plans and the facts surrounding her presence at the airport. Each word was deliberate and precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. She emphasized that she had complied with all requests and that there was no justification for the aggression she had endured. Her calm authority made it clear that any further escalation by the officer would be both unnecessary and indefensible in front of witnesses. Bystanders quietly acknowledged her composure, some nodding in support, others shaking their heads at the officer's conduct. The officer attempted to regain control, his voice rising slightly as he repeated previous questions and demands. The girl responded with steady, clear answers, maintaining eye contact and a calm demeanor. Her politeness and clarity made it impossible for him to justify his aggressive actions. Travelers around them whispered, sharing their admiration for the girl's bravery and noting how the situation had shifted entirely. Her composed approach had transformed the encounter from one of intimidation to one where her dignity and authority were undeniable. Minutes passed, and the officer grew increasingly uneasy. His gestures became uncertain and his attempts to assert dominance faltered. The girl continued to answer his questions respectfully, reinforcing her credibility and the truth of her situation. She maintained a calm and steady tone, ensuring that every statement was factual and precise. The bystanders' attention remained fixed on the interaction, and their silent recognition of her poise and courage further reinforced the shift in power. At this moment, a senior officer or airport security personnel arrived on the scene, drawn by the commotion. The arrival of higher authority caused the initial officer to pause, realizing that his actions were now being observed by colleagues as well. The girl remained composed, calmly explaining the situation to the arriving authority. Her polite and clear statements ensured that the facts were understood, and her calm demeanor left no doubt about her credibility. The bystanders watched closely, sensing that the arrival of additional personnel would bring resolution to the tense encounter. The senior officer quickly assessed the situation, noting the young girl's composure and the aggressive behavior of the initial officer. He asked a few questions which the girl answered calmly and respectfully, detailing her travel plans, her compliance with security procedures, and the fact that she had been unjustly slapped. Her clarity, honesty, and calm authority made it impossible for the senior officer to ignore the inappropriate conduct. The initial officer's demeanor continued to falter as he faced the reality of his actions being scrutinized. The bystanders continued to observe, some discreetly recording, others whispering quietly among themselves. The girl's calm persistence and clear articulation of facts had transformed the situation. What began as an aggressive confrontation had shifted into a demonstration of courage, dignity, and authority. The senior officer addressed the initial officer, making it clear that such behavior was unacceptable. The girl's compo after the incident, the girl continued her journey through the airport, but the experience lingered in her mind. She walked calmly to the departure area, holding her belongings with steady hands. Though shaken from the confrontation, she reflected on the power of remaining composed under pressure. Her heart still beat fast from the adrenaline, yet she carried herself with the same dignity and poise that had stopped the officer's aggression. She noticed travelers giving her subtle nods and glances of respect, some whispering about what they had witnessed. She found a quiet bench near her gate and sat down, taking a moment to process everything. The encounter had been intense, but it had also been a lesson in courage, clarity, and restraint. She understood that true authority did not come from raising one's voice or showing anger, but from staying calm, speaking truthfully, and holding oneself with integrity. The thought comforted her, reinforcing the strength she had shown in front of the officer and the crowd. As she waited, she overheard fragments of conversations around her. Travelers were discussing the confrontation, expressing admiration for the young girl's calmness and strength. Some mentioned how the officer had overstepped his authority and how they had witnessed her dignity under pressure. This realization filled her with a quiet sense of pride, not in arrogance, but in knowing that she had handled an unjust situation with clarity and courage. Her phone buzzed, and she checked a message from a family member who had been following her travel updates. They had heard about the incident from someone else at the airport. She smiled faintly, replying briefly to reassure them that she was safe. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment longer, considering sharing the story. But she decided that it was more important to remain focused on her journey and the lessons she had learned. The experience had already shaped her understanding of how composure could influence others and command respect without confrontation. The boarding announcement for her flight echoed through the terminal. She gathered her belongings, taking a slow, steady breath before standing. Her steps were calm and measured as she made her way to the gate. Travelers around her gave her respectful space, some glancing back as if to acknowledge the calm authority she had demonstrated. She realized that her actions had left a subtle impact on those who had witnessed the encounter, and that quiet satisfaction bolstered her confidence. As she approached the gate, a staff member gave her a nod of recognition, having likely heard about the incident. She responded with a polite nod, acknowledging their presence without letting it distract her. The girl understood that maintaining composure extended beyond the confrontation itself. It was about carrying the same dignity into the next moments of her day. She felt a renewed sense of empowerment, knowing that she had faced aggression, stayed calm, and remained true to herself throughout the ordeal. During the flight, she reflected on what had happened. She thought about the officer's aggression, the crowd's reactions, and her own response. Each memory reinforced the importance of calm clarity and assertive truth-telling. She understood that courage did not always look dramatic. It often appeared in quiet, controlled actions that commanded respect. She also recognized that the experience had taught her about human behavior under stress and how composure could influence those around her. Once the plane landed, she navigated through the new airport with the same calm focus. Her mind replayed the lessons she had learned, and she considered how she might use them in future interactions. Even the lingering sting from the slap did not diminish her confidence. Instead, it reminded her that standing firm with dignity and truth was a powerful tool against intimidation or disrespect. At the baggage claim, she retrieved her luggage and noticed a few travelers glancing her way, some whispering quietly. She smiled faintly to herself, recognizing that the quiet demonstration of courage she had exhibited had left a subtle impression. The experience had been a test of character, and she had passed it by maintaining composure, clarity, and courage. As she exited the airport, she took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling a sense of relief and accomplishment. The incident had been challenging, but it had also highlighted her ability to remain calm under pressure and assert her truth respectfully. She understood that while the world might present situations where aggression or unfair treatment occurred, her ability to respond with calm authority and dignity would always serve her well. She walked toward her destination with a steady pace, her head held high. The lesson of the encounter stayed with her. Courage was not always loud or confrontational, but often quiet, steady, and grounded in truth. The respect she had commanded from the officer, the bystanders, and even those who would hear of the story later reinforced this understanding. She felt a growing confidence in her ability to navigate challenging situations with integrity and composure. Later, she reflected on how the encounter had affected those around her. The bystanders who witnessed the confrontation had seen a young person confront aggression with calm authority. The officer had learned a lesson about the consequences of inappropriate behavior. The girl realized that her actions had extended beyond herself, subtly influencing the perceptions and reactions of others. Her courage and composure had created a ripple effect that underscored the power of dignity and respect in challenging situations. As the day ended, she carried the lessons forward with her. She knew that life would continue to present moments where patience, clarity, and composure would be essential. The airport incident had been more than a confrontation. It had been a testament to the strength found in calm courage, clear communication, and the unwavering commitment to stand firm in one's truth. She felt empowered, ready to face whatever came next with the same dignity, clarity, and resilience that had guided her through the airport ordeal. Said response and factual clarity had directly contributed to this resolution. The initial officer, now fully aware of the attention and scrutiny, stepped back. His aggressive stance softened, and he avoided making further confrontational gestures. The girl remained poised, calmly confirming her identity and travel plans as needed. The bystanders quietly expressed relief and admiration, recognizing the young girl's ability to maintain control and dignity throughout the encounter. Her calm authority had neutralized the aggression and ensured that the truth was respected. Travelers began to resume their normal movement through the terminal. Though many continued to glance at the girl with admiration, some quietly acknowledged her courage, while others whispered to friends or family about the remarkable way she had handled herself. The girl remained aware of the attention, but kept her focus on resolving the situation appropriately. She understood that maintaining her calm, respectful, and factual approach was essential until the encounter was fully resolved. The senior officer ensured that the initial officer's behavior was documented and addressed. The girl's clear and calm recounting of events had provided undeniable evidence of the inappropriate conduct. She was treated with respect and understanding, her dignity intact. The bystanders continued to notice the contrast between her composed authority and the initial officer's aggression. Her calm courage had turned a potentially humiliating and frightening situation into a demonstration of strength and poise. Recognizing, after the situation was resolved, the girl gathered her belongings, maintaining her composure as she prepared to continue her journey. She thanked the senior officer for addressing the situation and remained polite to all personnel involved. Her calmness and clarity had ensured that justice and respect prevailed, and the bystanders recognized the significance of her behavior. Some discreetly applauded or nodded in admiration, while others whispered about how remarkable it was to see someone handle such aggression with dignity and authority. As she walked away, the girl reflected quietly on the encounter. She realized the power of composure, clear communication, and respectful assertion of truth. The incident had been frightening and challenging recognizing, yet she had maintained her dignity and authority throughout. She understood that courage was not only about confronting aggression, but also about remaining calm, clear-headed and truthful in the face of intimidation. Her actions had influenced not only the officer, but also the perception of bystanders, demonstrating the impact of calm authority. The terminal slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of the confrontation lingered among those who had witnessed it. Travelers continued their routines, but many carried a subtle awareness of the young girl's bravery and composure. The officer who had acted aggressively was held accountable, and the young girl's calm and factual responses had ensured that the situation was resolved fairly. Her courage and dignity had created a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed the encounter. In the end, the young girl's experience highlighted the importance of composure, clarity, and courage. She had faced aggression and intimidation with calm authority and clear articulation of the truth. Her respectful but firm responses had neutralized hostility, garnered support from bystanders, and ensured accountability for inappropriate behavior. The incident at the airport became a testament to the power of maintaining dignity, standing firm in one's truth, and responding to injustice with calm authority rather than anger or panic. Her journey continued, leaving behind an enduring example of courage, composure, and respect for all who had witnessed it. Equinces. The crowd sensed this, and their silent acknowledgement strengthened her position. The officer, visibly frustrated, attempted to regain control by raising his voice and demanding more explanations. The girl, however, did not flinch. She responded with calm precision, repeating the facts and asserting her rights respectfully. Her voice was clear and steady, leaving no room for misinterpretation or dismissal. The bystanders continued to notice the stark contrast between her composure and the officer's faltering behavior. Her calm authority had effectively neutralized his aggression. Travelers nearby continued to whisper among themselves, recognizing the girl's courage and poise. Some discreetly recorded the encounter, understanding the significance of what they were witnessing. The girl remained focused on the officer, answering each question with calm, measured responses. Her words were respectful yet assertive, ensuring that her dignity remained intact while also making the officer's behavior increasingly indefensible. The officer, now visibly unsettled, attempted to shift the conversation by questioning her identification further. The girl provided the requested information politely, calmly explaining her identity and travel plans. Her clear, respectful, and factual responses left the officer with no basis to continue aggressive behavior. Each response she gave reinforced her authority and further weakened his position. The bystanders, recognizing the fairness and intelligence of her approach, continued to show subtle support. As Part 4 progresses, the girl's calm composure and clear communication had fully shifted the power dynamic. The officer was visibly struggling to maintain control, and the bystanders recognized the stark contrast between the girl's dignity and his inappropriate aggression. Her calm authority, factual clarity, and respectful demeanor had effectively neutralized the situation, making it impossible for the officer to continue without facing scrutiny from both the crowd and potential recording devices. The scene set the stage for the final resolution, where her courage and composure would leave a lasting impression on everyone involved and ensure that justice and respect prevailed. The encounter. The officer, increasingly uncertain, tried to regain composure himself. His movements were less aggressive, his tone less assertive. The girl continued to stand tall, her voice steady, her statements factual and precise. She calmly reiterated her rights and explained that her behavior had been proper and respectful throughout the encounter. The bystanders watching could see the contrast. A young girl demonstrating courage and authority versus an adult officer struggling to maintain control. The girl's calm persistence began to have a subtle effect on the officer. His confidence eroded as he faced the reality that his aggressive actions were being observed and recorded. He shifted uncomfortably, trying to regain control, but the girl's composure and clarity left him with no clear path to assert dominance. The bystanders continued to whisper and observe, sensing that the young girl had effectively taken command of the interaction through her calm authority. As Part 3 concludes, the young girl had successfully maintained her composure and authority, despite the aggression she faced. Her one-word response had initiated a shift in power, and her continued calm, factual, and respectful statements had reinforced her position. The officer was visibly unsettled, and the bystanders had begun to recognize the girl's courage and intelligence. The stage was set for the next phase, where her clarity, poise, and the quiet support of those around her would continue to challenge the officer's actions and ensure that justice and respect prevailed. The calmness ensured that the situation was being reframed on her terms. The officer's behavior became erratic as he struggled to regain control. He shifted his weight, fidgeted with his uniform, and muttered half-formed statements, all while the girl maintained eye contact and a steady voice. She spoke clearly about her rights and her travel plans, ensuring that her words were both factual and unassailable. Her composure contrasted sharply with the officer's disarray, making it increasingly difficult for him to continue the aggressive behavior. Bystanders began to exchange glances, some nodding in recognition of the girl's courage. Others whispered to each other about how impressive it was to see someone so young handle such an intense situation with calm authority. The girl noticed the silent support, but remained focused, understanding that any distraction could allow the officer to regain the upper hand. She kept her words measured, her posture firm, and her gaze steady, maintaining the authority she had established with her initial response. Time seemed to stretch as the girl continued to stand her ground. She repeated key facts, clarified her intentions, and refused to be intimidated by the officer's aggressive gestures. Each calm and measured response further weakened his position, leaving him unsure of how to proceed. The bystanders' reactions grew more supportive, and some began to whisper encouraging words, recognizing the courage and composure the girl displayed. The officer tried once more to assert dominance, raising his voice slightly, but it only served to highlight the contrast between his aggression and the girl's calm authority. She remained unshaken, speaking clearly and respectfully, ensuring that her words could not be misconstrued or dismissed. The situation began to feel as though it was being observed in slow motion. The officer's frustration was visible, while the girl's composure commanded attention and respect. Witnesses around them continued to notice the girl's poise and the officer's faltering confidence. A few discreetly filmed the encounter, realizing the significance of what they were witnessing. Others whispered to each other, acknowledging the courage and clarity the girl displayed. The girl maintained her composure, understanding that her calm authority was influencing not only the officer but also the perception of those around her. By the end of Part 2, the young girl had transformed the encounter with her calm, composed, and authoritative response. Her one-word statement had shifted the power dynamic, and her continued clarity and dignity left the officer unsure of how to proceed. The bystanders had recognized her courage, and the stage was set for further developments where her intelligence, poise, and authority would continue to challenge the officer's aggression and command respect in the terminal. Demonstrating an understanding of authority and the courage to stand up to wrongful behavior. Each word she spoke was deliberate, carefully measured to maintain dignity while asserting the reality of what had happened. The bystanders began to take notice more openly. Some reached for their phones to record the incident discreetly, understanding that what they were witnessing was extraordinary. Others whispered to each other, acknowledging the girl's courage and the abrupt shift in the officer's demeanor. The girl noticed the support growing around her, quiet but palpable, and it gave her an additional sense of strength. She realized that her composure was not only protecting her, but also influencing the perception of those witnessing the event. As the minutes dragged on, the officer's attempts to assert dominance became increasingly ineffective. His voice wavered slightly, his gestures less assured as the weight of the girl's calm authority and truth pressed against his aggression. He seemed caught between maintaining his perceived power and acknowledging the reality of the situation. The girl continued to stand firm, polite, and clear, refusing to let him derail her with intimidation or hostility. The surrounding travelers continued to watch, some quietly nodding in recognition of the girl's poise. Others whispered among themselves, expressing surprise at the way someone so young could command respect and assert authority without aggression. The girl noticed these subtle reactions but remained focused on the officer, understanding that maintaining her calm, professional demeanor was key to navigating the situation successfully. The terminal felt tense, charged with the contrast between the officer's aggression and the girl's composed resilience. Each interaction, each word, and each gesture became significant, as the girl subtly but powerfully shifted the dynamics of the encounter. She understood that composure, Clarity and truth could be more impactful than anger or confrontation, and she used these qualities deliberately. By the end of part 1, the young girl had faced aggression, mockery, and an unjust slap, yet she remained composed, confident, and clear in asserting her truth. The bystanders had begun to recognize her courage and the authority inherent in her calm, measured response. The stage was set for the next phase of the encounter, where her intelligence, composure, and courage would continue to influence the situation and challenge the behavior of the officer.